welcome to our show, Brilliant Business Insights. I'm Jen Fredericks, and this is Lori Kuhn. And we're here to help you cut through the workplace BS, the business stress. So to do that today, our topic is reaching peak performance by releasing tension and stress. What does that even mean, peak performance?
Well, it's interesting because I got hung up on the releasing tension and stress part. So I was just like, how can you perform? How can you perform when you're in tension and stress?
That's a huge block.
Right.
A big wall.
So everything we talk about is like your parasympathetic versus your sympathetic nervous system. So right off the bat, if I'm in tension and stress, I am not in peak performance mode. I'm not even in performance
You're
mode.
in survival mode.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so when I think about peak performance, my go-to guy when I think of peak performance is Steven Kotler. I love it because he takes the perspective, the neuroscience behind it, and that speaks to me. And so when he talks about peak performance, he talks about it in terms of an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and perform our best. So it's those moments of rapt attention and total absorption when you get so focused on the task at hand that everything else disappears. And there are two sides to this. So I always think about the two different perspectives of this. There are things where I really enjoy what I'm doing and time passes. And then there are those times where I'm highly stressed and I know I have an hour to get this done and I have 3 hours worth of work and I'm so caught up in the stress that the time goes fast. And so oftentimes people think, peak performance is when time flies, 2 hours goes by and it feels like 20 minutes. Well, that also happens in high states of stress. So I'm so stressed to get this done that the time flies and I'm like, I need 5 more hours to get this done.
Yet you still get it done.
Well, maybe not in time, and the final result may not be the quality you're looking for. So oftentimes when you're in that state and you complete something and you go back, you find all those, oh crap, why'd I do that? I should have done this. And when you're in flow, and this is what Steven Kotler calls it, when you're in flow and you're operating from that state of peak performance, you get your best work. So then things come through you and you look back and you're like, and I find I do this. I go back and I read something that I did and I'm like, I wrote that? I'm sure you've done it.
Did I do that?
Right, did I do that? But so when I think of time passing, and we have another show coming out on time management, but being in flow when time is passing is the result of it is far better than something you would have created than had it been from the place of stress and time is passing quickly. But so he gets into, the absorption of it and time disappears and the action and the awareness merge. So your sense of self vanishes, time passes strangely. And then this is a point I was just talking about, your performance soars. So now not only are you getting more done, but you're getting more done at a higher level.
Gotcha. So have there been any moments in your life, and I think you kind of talked a little bit about it, but do you have an example of when you hit that challenge and skills merging together, sweet spot?
Yeah, and he goes into that. It's the challenge skills sweet spot. So you need some challenge. And I find I need this too. And it's interesting because my daughter had this realization about herself from like middle school on that she needs, and she was one of those really smart students. And so classes bored her. She's always sitting in the state of being bored. And so you're kind of walking that line of being challenged, but not over challenged where it derails you. And so you want to be challenged enough where, or under enough pressure that it motivates you, but not too much that it takes you out of flow and not too little that you become complacent.
That reminds me a lot of the work and the information that Kelly McGonigal shares in the book, The Upside of Stress, where, a lot of times stress is made the villain in all sense and purposes.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can look at stress sometimes as that piece of motivation like the upside of stress of being up against a deadline
Yeah.
that helps you get to that creative, innovative place. But what I also hear you saying is that as you come up against that stress or that tension, you need to have some tools to bring yourself into a flow state versus a, oh my God, what am I going to do state?
Yeah, the PNS state, parasympathetic nervous system, versus the stress
Gotcha.
state, the sympathetic nervous system. And so it's interesting because one of the things that our guest will go dive a little more deeply into today is like the emotional side of it and how you can use that as your GPS. And so people are like, well, how do I know if I'm in flow? How do I know if I'm stressed versus not stressed? And there are a lot of dynamics that go on there, but you can tell by how you feel. I always say using your emotions as your GPS. If you're starting to get into exhaustion and overwhelm, well, that's not your peak state. If you're getting into lethargy and boredom, that's not your peak state. So you can start, when you really get in tune with your emotions, and she'll talk a little more about this too, you can start gauging that and using that to find that sweet spot when you're working optimally.
Gotcha. So the fine line.
Yes,
walking the tightrope of the fine line of your parasympathetic.
Yeah, and I always say I'm like, when I drop into flow or I'm aligned, we talk about it in terms of being aligned or connected to your internal truth. There's always this wavering, so your boss walks in and yells at you and you go over here. So now you're kind of outside of your flow. But then, and I tell people this all the time, in these moments of stress, in these moments of trying to get into peak performance, it's all about navigating you back. So it's not about getting the job done, doing more, trying to, check things off your to-do list. In that moment, when I feel myself out of flow, it becomes about getting myself back into flow.
The only thing on your to-do list in that moment is to get back to yourself.
To reconnect.
Reconnect.
Because now get back into flow. Because now if I'm too stressed, so my boss comes in and yells at me and I'm operating over here going, oh my God, I got everybody, and I'm yelling at my team. We have deadlines. Now I'm throwing everybody else out of flow. We're less productive. Now we're back in the sympathetic nervous system. We're stressed out. We're not in our peak performance. So we're not going to perform that way. And so if my boss comes in and yells at me, that moment I'm checking in with myself and going, okay, in this moment, what do I need to do to realign? What do I need to do? Sometimes people breathe. What is it I need to do to check in, get clear, and start moving forward from that space instead of the frazzled, frantic space that was just introduced.
Put the fires out type thing.
Right.
That people actually think motivate people and push people to get things done. And I need this in 10 minutes. And we needed this yesterday. I'm like, that's going to help me get nowhere.
Yeah. Well, I have one of my clients says, I like to keep my guys competitive. Well, great. There is that healthy competition. But then there's that line where it becomes intimidating for people. Like, I can't keep up, or I'm not going to speak up because then I'm going to be the one that, looks like I don't know what I'm doing. So there are a lot of other dynamics that come into it when you're talking about group. And that's one of the things I love about Stephen Kotler. He talks a lot about group flow. And it's one of the things we talk about. There's an individual flow, an individual energy, and there's a group. And the group can support, each person within the group can support each other, or each person or a person within the group can throw the group off or throw someone out of it. Yeah. And so it's really paying attention to an individual flow, and there's a group flow. And so with this particular client of mine, I always tell him, is this competition among the guys, is it keeping them in flow, or is it throwing some of them out of flow? So you have to be aware of what that is for everybody.
And I would think that in order to be aware of what that is for other people, you first need to be hyper aware of what that is for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we always talk about, it starts with you from the inside out.
Yes. And it's interesting because I can't tell you how many senior level, executive level people that we've had come through our programs, and they come in wanting to fix their team. And so it's always, okay, if you could just, help me with some team alignment strategies.
It's never me.
Right?
I don't need help. But I need you to take care of those guys.
Yeah, those guys are the
Over
problem.
there.
They're off the rails.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get along.
Sales. It's sales. It's
Yeah.
anyone. It's creative. They can't go with the account managers. Account managers push, put them in tension and stress. Want the creatives to reach peak performance. And then there's nothing.
Yeah.
Because peak performance, creativity, innovation does not come from tension and stress.
Right. It's interesting because I think of Office Space, and there's a guy in there. Do you remember the scene?
Yeah.
He's being interviewed by people, and he's like, his job is he's the people person. He communicates between the customers and management and the employees, and so he keeps everything flowing well. And in the interview, they're really getting deep into the questioning, and he goes, "Well, I'm a people person." And he goes, and by the end of it, he's yelling, "I'm a people person. I like people." And, he's just like this aggressive, over the top. And it's in such contrast to what his role is.
Exactly.
And I think that's what managers do. They don't see their part in it. And it's always about fixing everybody else. And it's interesting. I used to do business risk consulting for Arthur Andersen. And I would go in, and all I had to do was speak to the head of the department, the owner of the company, whatever it was. And I could tell within 20 minutes the dynamic of the team.
Oh, wow.
And so one of the greatest revelations was I was sitting with a group of executive leaders, and I was training their teams, but part of training their teams is training them so they all have the common language. And one of them sits back after probably 8 hours of training and goes, "This is about me, isn't it?" But in that moment, I knew he'd never managed the same again. And he got it. This guy is never going to manage his people the same.
Right.
And that's what we look for in people. You're looking for that awareness of, oh, I get it now.
It's the whole, it's not you, it's me.
Right. Yeah, right.
For us to reach peak performance as a team, don't worry. It's not you. It's me.
Right.
Well, so I'm sitting here asking myself, and I probably should have thought of this before, but when have I reached peak performance, and how did I get there?
That's a great question.
It is a great question.
Yeah.
And so I'm reflecting, and I'm trying to get there. And I think I'm having such a great time with the discussion. I can't get there in my mind. So is there a time that you can remember you've reached peak performance, and how did you get there?
And how? Well, so I know when it's not. So
that's so easy to
you're like, and then I'll wrap around and get to that one. So one of the times, it was when I was in public accounting, and this was my first job it was called BDO Seedman at the time. Now it's BDO, but right out of college. And it was probably a Saturday at 1:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was trying to figure out if I wanted to be a tax accountant or an auditor. And so I was doing both. So, of course, you're doing everything, and it becomes overwhelming because now you have people, and partners and managers from both sides giving you stuff. So I'm doing a tax return. And it should have taken me 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, it wasn't really complex, but it took me 2 hours. And I'm like, I need to just go home and go to bed because I'm not performing at all. If I'm doubling my time, I need to go recharge. But at that time in my career, I didn't know that. At that time in my career, I have to get this done at all costs. I have to get this done. And so you push through that. Had I just gone home, slept, came in the next day, I could have finished it in 45 minutes to an hour and been on to other things.
Right.
But so I think when we think of performance, we lose that side of it. We just think the more we do, the more we do.
Well, I mean, it's the culture that we live in.
Yeah.
The metric right now is how much can I produce, and that equates my worth.
Yeah.
And that's really sad. At all costs. It's really sad when you take into account what innovations and creativity and breakthroughs could come if we weren't looking to produce all the time, but looking to reach peak performance and innovate.
Yeah. And a lot comes into that. So when you ask me, what does it look like for you to be in peak performance? It's I'm eating well. I've had a good night's sleep. I can connect. So I come in. I mean, there's a lot I do before I have a client session or before I go into a corporation. I mean, I go in and this I learned from Tony Robbins, because a lot of what Tony Robbins teaches is getting in state. So he calls it getting in state versus getting into flow. But so I set my intention, I breathe, I make sure I feel good. I do all those physiological things. And then I make sure I'm prepared. I do whatever I can do to mitigate fear. I do whatever I can do to mitigate stress. So I take all of those things that throw us out of flow and I check in with all of it and I align. And so we talk about your human internal operating system.
Yes.
And we talk about your thoughts, beliefs, emotions, your inner truth, your behaviors.
And desires. Yes.
And your desires. And okay, everything's aligned. I'm ready to go. And then that's when I do my check-in and I'm there.
That doesn't have anything to do with a meeting agenda or your checklist or
what I have to get done in an hour.
No, none of that.
No, yeah.
Who of our viewers starts that way in order to try to reach their peak performance?
So yes, those things we need the most to reach peak performance is what we let go.
Right.
So we're in a hurry. So like you said, we're in a hurry, we get McDonald's.
Yep.
We're in a hurry, we don't work out. We need more hours in our day, so we drop our workouts.
We don't stretch and release tension in our neck from looking at the computer all day.
Yeah, we don't sleep as long. I got to get up earlier. So those things that are most critical to peak performance, we let go of.
How do we change that?
Well, you learn your human internal operating system. You learn how to align. You learn what you can handle and what you can't handle. It all goes into, personal responsibility and self-awareness side of it. And it's interesting because one of the reports that came out by McKinsey and Company is that there's a 500% performance improvement. That's huge. 500%. This was a 2017 study by McKinsey. That while in flow or being able to drop into flow always results in peak performance. And so if you can drop into flow, if you can get in state, if you can what we call get aligned, there's a 500% increase in performance.
That's mind-boggling.
Right. And it's taking all those things into account that we just talked about. So, some bosses going in there, I don't care how much time you spend on this, you get this done. Well, no, I'm going to go in there and say, have you recharged? Where are you at? How are you feeling mentally? How does your body feel? I'm going in and I'm doing the checklist on the individual and what they're experiencing. And then if you're tired, go home. If you need to eat, go take the time to go get a healthy meal. I'm that person.
Yes. We would like to welcome our guest.
Awesome.
Yes, today we are going to bring in Laura Donnelly, who has developed the body-brain balance method to guide those she works with to learn to dance with ease. I love that. Dance with ease through life and all of life's adventures. Laura is a teacher, performer, mentor, choreographer, writer, business coach, and founder of Dancing with Ease. So she teaches body-brain business balance. Body-brain business balance. Based on 35 plus years as a performer and teacher of the Alexander technique, movement fundamentals, somatics, which is of the body, coming into the body, and business management. Multi-talented, successful, sensitive people hire Laura to teach them to reduce stress, eliminate overwhelm, and discover their right effort to achieve dynamic balance in all activities.
Cool.
Hi there.
Hey, how are you, Laura?
I am so glad to see you, and look how perfect I match your background.
You match. We all match. Look at that. It's like we planned it. We're in flow.
We're in flow.
We're in flow. Peak performance.
And
so Laura,
so many things that you were saying that I was listening to your talk, and so many that you were saying were just like alignment, coming back to yourself, and the thing you were talking about I don't know how I got into peak performance state, that flow state. Mostly we don't know. It just happens. Sometimes a crisis will throw you into your peak performance state, which a little bit both of you just described crisis experiences in terms of the being on stage. And what used to happen to me is I would be ready to enter for my part, and suddenly the tempo would sound to me half time.
Really?
Oh, it was the weirdest thing, but it was just nerves, and then I would just have to go quit that and start, and then everything would just go. But the other thing that, Lori, I think you described was you didn't really know what happened in between when you started to play the thing and your conductor said, go to the first chair. This is the other thing about that state is afterwards, everything flowed really wonderfully, but you have no idea what really happened. Because it's the judging brain, you know. You said, what does the brain do this for? Or the consciousness that you were talking about taking a back seat. It's the part that says this note should be a little sharper, this one should be a little softer, this one should, that constant that a piece of the brain does. That's the piece of the brain that knocks us out of flow, I think. It's the one that likes to worry. It's what did somebody say the other day? If I don't feed that part of the brain well, it goes off on its own and starts to consume me.
It
And
hijacks you. It's like it hijacks you.
yes. And so a good part of what I like to help people do is to learn to use that bean counting facility of the brain, the one that likes to say this is better and this is not better and you better do this and you better, and so suddenly you feel like you're on a teeter-totter all the time. And I just talk to parts of my brain. I don't know if you guys do that, but I talk to parts of my brain.
Like, be quiet. That part right there.
But what I do to it now is I say, I need you to pay attention. And you're excellent at paying attention. So I want you to pay attention to this one thing. Am I getting more intense, more tight, more excited, more angry, more whatever? Just let me know. You don't have to say good, bad, or indifferent. Just let me know. Or am I moving in a direction of easing so that I'm able to discover the right effort? Because that's what that flow state is you somehow magically, it's not really magic, it's the human, the beauty of being totally present in your human state. It knows exactly the right amount of energy for the activity that you need to complete. And when this little chatter part of the brain is going, little tightening, I say, oh, I can come back now. Thank you. And it says, oh, you're easing nicely. And I think, okay, I'm going to keep easing, because as soon as I go to pat myself on the back, I have taken myself out because I stopped being in the moment to congratulate myself. So
that's so interesting.
I look at it in terms of like ROI when I'm thinking of business. And so there's a point where, and it's an example I used earlier, where it was, 1 a.m. and it was taking me twice as long. So there's a point in performance where you're exerting more energy than you should be to complete the task at hand. And so it's knowing, okay, it's that sweet spot again that we mentioned, where it's taking me twice as long to do this. And so what do I need to do to get back into the flow state? Is it more sleep? Is it, taking stuff off my plate? What is it? So I'm back in that sweet spot of exerting just enough energy to, perform at my best. That's the peak performance place, to perform at my best and get the most done with the least amount of effort. And so that's what I hear you saying, is finding that spot.
Yeah. And also, one of the things that happens to us is when that happens, we think, I've got to get back there. And that energy
this
blows
the way
it out of the water again.
Right.
Yep.
And so what I find fascinating is you use movement to help people get there. So how do you use movement to help people get there?
Okay. Well, first, we're moving all the time. And we aren't always paying attention to how we're moving. And part of that is our brain fixates on something. Even like here, the computer screen. And I like what you guys are saying, so I want to hear more. And then I lean in and then I'm not, wait, I lost myself. I went out of myself into the screen. and then the other thing for movement is to say, what I convinced myself of, I decided to change my belief system so that anything that I notice, whether it's taking me out of my ease and flow or taking me back into it, that's a win because I noticed it. And we notice through the body. The body is what gives us this information. And so the body's always moving. The one of the I don't know about you guys. Because I was dancing, I was also always paying attention to my breath. I
Mm.
did a lot of modern dance. Well, I wasn't always. In ballet, I was holding my breath. When I, when I started to do modern dance, I started to breathe differently and with the movement. And then I started to add that to my ballet dancing. And I'm like, why don't they teach this? You know, um, and so breathing is one of the things that we do our entire life,
Mhm.
but it is movement. And so the quality of our breath can give us information about that alignment that you were talking about earlier, you guys, of your whole self. Because if I get nervous, if I think of something that makes me nervous, and I start to think, oh, what am I going to do if that happens? And then I'm not breathing. I'm just up here and I'm
It's right
just
here.
yeah, yeah,
Right
right
here.
here. And I'm taking little tiny short breaths so that I
Mhm.
don't fall over and pass out because I wasn't worried about passing out exactly, but I was worried about something else. But my breathing is a quick change
Mhm.
notification. Is it and when I come back to myself, I just naturally take a bigger breath. So people might not think of that as movement, but I really consider that as sort of your elemental movement in the
Mm.
world.
That's beautiful. I actually
Mhm.
never thought of breathing again before I started doing this work here with Thrive. And I recall I was going through a lot of trauma at the time that I had started my certification, and all of my breathing stopped here,
Ah,
right here. I'd be sitting in certification class and I'd go, okay, I'm not good. So what I was able to do was bring a better quality of breath to my life, where I called it the straw. So I knew I was with myself and I was aligned. And when I could take a breath and I could feel it go all the way from the top of my head, all the way down through my body to the floor, and I would just be like,
yeah.
afterwards. It was the straw breath. And if that's all I ever took from that certification, it would have been the savior of my life. I took much more. But I love thinking of that. We don't have to work so hard to find movement that can bring us into peak performance, as breath is an elemental movement.
Mhm.
That's very fascinating.
And I love that there's so many aspects of movement. Like, I mean, some of the things that Tony Robbins taught are there different points that you can hold to help with stress or to help with.
Is this one like a headache one?
Yeah, and there's some that's when you're getting into meridians
Yeah.
and things of that nature. But there's that physiological, the kinesiology
Yes.
side of it that goes into, if you're stressed, you can hold different points on your body. But we naturally do that. If someone's stressed and overwhelmed, they'll put their hand on their forehead and
Yes.
set it on the table. And how it's fascinating because all those are points that really do help you. Or if people stand with their arms over the center part of their body, they're protecting, what some people call the solar plexus or their gut. They're protecting themselves, their value, other things that go along with that. But one of the things we talk about is experiential listening, and you can hear part of what you can hear is watching someone and seeing how they're holding themselves and what's going on physically. So that's a lot of what I hear you saying is it's that there's so much information in the physical aspect of who you're being at any point in time.
Right. And the thing about the body is it's a sensory mechanism. It's in the world to receive sensory input and give you information. And So a lot of times, if I do the thing that I call coming back to myself, which is coming back to the ease in my system, I can feel my body shift when I'm talking to somebody. So if I'm talking to somebody who is anxious about the state of the world, and they're like saying this, and then I feel myself move a little bit towards that. And then that reminds me, because I got my little chatterbox part of my brain saying, "Oh, you're going over there." And I say, "Thank you." And I come back to me. But then I have more information about the person I was talking to, that I am talking to, what their physical state is. I mirror their physical state.
Mm-hmm.
And based on what they're saying, I try not to jump to a conclusion that if I was feeling this is this physical state, this is what I would be feeling emotionally. That's not necessarily what the other person is feeling.
Mm.
But based on their words too, then I can ask questions and get closer to what's going on for them, and my body alerts me also when they start to calm down. My body will also start to calm down.
Mm-hmm.
They will mirror me, which is one of these things, how a lot of times when you talk, you go for lunch for your friend and your friend's all upset and blah, blah, I did this and blah, 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 and my boss did this, and they want you to join them in that and tell them that they're right and that their boss was being a jerk today or whatever. And you can feel yourself being pulled towards that energy with them. But if you use that pull to remind yourself to come back to yourself, they will actually also mirror you and kind of come back. So this goes back to the very early thing I heard you say, Lori, is that your manager that you had talked to at that time said, "Oh, this is really more about me." It's always about you.
Yeah.
And your choice of how you respond. So do
It's
you? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, do I choose to my response? Do I choose to leave my alignment?
Mm.
Or do I choose to use the thing that is disturbing and trying to pull me out of alignment to as a reminder to recenter? And if I do that, I get stronger at coming back to my own alignment, to knowing what my alignment is, to get it's not that we never go out. It's like we go out all the time. But the deal is, how fast can I come back? How
I hear
often?
you saying that it's the movement. If you pay attention to your movement, then you have the choice to disrupt the pattern of how you're going to move forward in that moment.
Right. And you can what I have found is I can be present with people in a much more authentic way. You were talking about listening, a kind of a deeper listening or authentic listening to people. When I'm aware of something they say that alerts me to ideas, history, agenda I might have, whatever those things are. When I'm aware of that and I come back, then I make a little space for them to sort through their problems. And and I think for all people who like to who are kind and giving and helping kind of people,
Mm-hmm.
this can feel like not doing enough.
True.
I should be doing more to help these people.
Mm-hmm.
And really, to be anchored in ourselves, at ease in ourselves, then we create this space for them to discover when they're out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always say it's giving and I use it from the standpoint of boundaries. When you have good boundaries, it gives others the opportunity to step into their potential. And
Yeah,
so when I align, when I come back and I handle the energy state that's mine, then it gives them an opportunity to figure out what it is for them. And I like what you said, it's creating the space. And so I do a lot of the stuff from an energetic standpoint. So if I'm coming back to calm, and this gets a lot into neuro linguistic programming, NLP, is if I can create that state of calm, and it goes into entanglement and social contagion and emotional contagion, depending on what line of science you're in. Contagion. But if someone comes in and they're hyper and stressed, and I can get to calm and alignment, they have a better chance of getting there because I'm holding that space for them. If they come in and they're hyper and stressed and I go into that, now we're both feeding that dynamic. And so I liked what you said earlier about connecting with your ease. Can you talk a little more about what it is to find that ease within yourself, especially during heightened situations, and a little bit more about what that is?
So again, going back to using your body as your gauge of what's going on, um, and reminding you how subtle it is, that place of being in yourself, at ease in yourself, and aligned. It's like, what do I think about? If I stop putting myself out of alignment, my body will go back in alignment. But if I'm out of alignment and I say I have to get back here, I'm apt to overshoot the mark. So one of the things that I use often, because everybody has a hand usually and a fist, but you can do it with your feet if you want, because you can squeeze your toes. And if you squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and notice what you notice, and as you're seeing me squeeze tighter, what you feel in your body while I do this is information. And then I just stop squeezing because that's really uncomfortable. But different people have different awarenesses. So some people will squeeze and all they notice is that their fingernails are poking into their fist. They have no awareness of their arm, their shoulder, or anything else. Now I'm going to relax that a minute because I lived so long in that hypertense place that it's still real attractive to my body. My body still believes it learned really, try hard, do better, all these things that we learn, and it got really good at it, and it's a little disappointed sometimes when I tell it that that's too much. And not too much as in my personality being too much and overwhelming people, which was another crunch in my life, but that energy that is so good, if I come back to ease, which is just taking my fist and stopping squeezing, then I have way more energy and I can run it longer at a better pace. And so it's not that I think we talked about this before. So it's not that roller coaster thing.
Yeah. The ups and downs.
Yeah, and every once in a while, it's wonderful to go to the top of the roller coaster and take your hands off that bar and just sail down.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Go ahead, we can do that sometimes. Maybe better on vacation when you're windsurfing, but it is a change in I think in biorhythm and energy and how I consider my energy to be at its peak. My definition changed. And having been in performance and you guys and in the theater, how sometimes people rev themselves up backstage so they can get ready for the show.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not do that. I used to go into the dressing room and have my own little corner where I could bubble and avoid that.
The bubble is so important. The bubble, the boundary. Yes.
And so then I could make my own bubble of ease so that I had that my preparation that I needed to perform well. And so what I tell people too is sometimes they're like, well, I'm squeezing my hand, I want to stretch it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a stretched out fist.
Because you're still having that tension.
Still having that
You're
tension.
not at ease.
Yeah, I just moved the tension. Now, if I want to open my fist, okay, so if I go to ease here, this is ease. And then I say, okay, I can hear better ease in my voice. My wrist isn't tight. My elbow's not tight. Now I want to open my hand. Well, just check it out. My hand wanted to turn. I'm like, well, that's interesting. It didn't want to go this way, facing at me. It didn't want to pop. If I'm in an easy place and I know what I want to do next, my body will just do it the way it wants to do it, which will
So
have more open energy. For me, my experience is it has a more open energy, a more welcoming energy, a more space for communication.
So I was just going to ask the question as we're taking a look at understanding the foundations of what you mean about getting to ease with movement and in your body. How does that translate into work? Like, why are you interested in body, brain, business balance?
Well, okay. So here's the deal. You take your body everywhere you go.
No, you don't. You do? You do. I do too.
And okay, this is just me, right? But I live in my body, and my body lives in the world, and my body gets information and gives me information about the world. If you're in, if how you do your business, how you think about your business takes you out of yourself, then we're in that dynamic where, well, if I just finish this, then I can go back to being me. If I just get this to go right, then I can. And I'm like, really? What if there's only now?
Mm-hmm.
And so right now, what if you pay attention to your body brain balance? And this may mean that you realize that you got yourself in a career that's not your happy, good, healthy for your body and brain career. That's kind of sad, but knowing that you can make gradual steps into the right, into something that fits you better, allows you to be your peak performance more often. And and it's an activity. Business is just an activity, like walking, like breathing, like talking to your husband. Anything you do can shift you out of yourself and give you the opportunity to say, oh, let me come back now. Oh, getting those taxes done on that date makes me nervous. Let me come back and see how easily I can get that done. Let me, if I'm going to stay with these people, work with them, let me find out what I need to do with them to work on how to get this done so there's not a crisis at the end of the year every year.
Right.
So you can use this same, how am I balanced in myself, and what pulls you out of balance, to find out what is out of balance in your work life, or if you're an entrepreneur building your business. What Instagram, everybody's Instagram. And I'm like, oh yeah, no.
Not my place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Twitter.
Oh, well, what I hear you saying is that it's using your body as a GPS is another great tool to coming back to yourself to reach your peak performance. And what I'm finding so interesting with each of the guests that we welcome on the show is everyone is coming with great tools for people to help find their way to align and be grounded and come into themselves so that they can reach their peak performance. And so I was going to ask you, Laura, I know that you were part of a collaborative book. You wrote a chapter in a book, and I was hoping you could just share the book so that if people are interested in what you have to share, you'll hold it up. That's great. It's
like me and Vanna White.
Vanna White. It's called Joy on Demand, Choose Healthy Habitual Happiness. And Cheryl Mertz was one of the authors, as well as you, Laura, and I believe there are several others that joined you, but you wrote the chapter called Living with Joy. And I'd assume that you go into a lot of your ideas and thoughts on body, brain balance in that chapter.
I did, and especially looking at people who are very empathetic, and because our care for other people and our empathetic impulse often, and I think Laurie talked about this either the other day or today, the influx of information from other people can confuse our system about what is my feeling and what is the other person's feeling. And this confusion of where we are and what, is this my anger or is this their anger? Or like if my friend was mad at her boss, am I righteously angry for her? Or, okay, so yes, there's a lot of parsing of things, but the ease will tell you right away when you're messed up in it. And see, if I go into the analysis, and my voice is up and my throat is high and I'm like, oh, analysis. Okay, what's the right effort for me to analyze something?
It's interesting because I always think about it from an awareness standpoint. If I'm so aware of me and how I operate that I can discern what's not me. So I've gotten so good at that when I check in, so like we were talking about earlier with your human internal operating system, that if something comes into my experience and I feel out of flow, it's really quick for me to do a check-in and be like, nope, not mine. I mean, it just, and people at first when they're learning this, they're like, oh, that's so much, that's a lot of work. And it's like, until you build the skill, once you get the skill, it's instantaneous.
Yes.
Like I can tell right away, nope, not mine. And I don't even engage in it. Like I'm that quick.
And then you can move toward ease and joy.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, I would love for you to let viewers know how they can get in touch with you to learn more about how you help people and in companies and businesses get to their right effort with ease in order to reach peak performance. How would you like them to reach out to you?
Oh, goodness. That is a good question. And it made me hold my breath and lose my ease. Should I send them to my website? Should I give them my email?
Well, I do know, I know by heart your email is laura@dancingwithease.com. So they could reach out.
They could just reach out. And I love to meet new people. And I love to connect and engage. And I love to bring people together so that if I meet somebody and they're saying, well, I'm looking at this or that. I talked to somebody the other day and she thinks her granddaughter is possibly gifted. And I know someone who runs a website about helping gifted children. And so I'm going to connect them.
Awesome.
I mean, it's just really fun. So if people have a question, they say like, what the heck is this ease thing? I have a lot of free resources on my website, and it's all a dance. It's not a fixed anything. It's in this, like I like talking to you guys. You guys are fun and easy, and we have a lot of ideas in alignment. It's a super. But then you ask me that one question, and I'm like, oh, I danced right on to the apron there, out of the light. Let me come back.
That's awesome. Well, we certainly enjoyed having you dance with us today on Brilliant Business Insights, and look forward to having some more conversations with you in the future.
Thank you, Laura.
So much.
Thank you, Laura.
I was so happy to be here.
Awesome. I love when she said everything is a dance.
Yeah, I like that too.
Everything is a dance.
And just everybody we talk to and everything I've studied and all the neuroscience, it's always that alignment piece.
Yes.
And so I just want to mention this book. It's The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. And I took the sleeve off so it doesn't really look like this. And then I drew my own little picture on there. But
that sounds about right.
The important thing is it's called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. And when it comes to peak performance, this is a fabulous book. So he calls it the Peak Performance Primer. So if you're looking to operate in and from peak performance, this is a great place to start. In addition to a lot of the great ideas that that Laura brought.
Right. And so what I'm taking away from today is this is just another great tool to have in your toolbox in order to come into alignment, in order to access your parasympathetic nervous system so that you can get to that flow and so that you can reach peak performance in your life, in your business, in your work. How about you?
Yeah, and a lot of and it's something I used to use with my kids and I use with people in business all the time. If you can't get there internally, because some people don't have a high degree of we call it emotional aptitude, you can call it emotional intelligence. But if you don't have that, sometimes it's easy to get there from the external environment.
Sure.
That's a lot of what I heard Laura saying. If you feel this or you notice yourself doing that or you see someone doing this. And so I used to say, if you don't feel good and putting on makeup makes you feel better, put on makeup. If, buying an outfit makes you feel better, go get an outfit. If you need those external things to get your internal jump started,
yes,
absolutely go there.
I love that. Use your behavior to change your experience in life. Or if behavior is not your change motivator, use your emotion or your desire.
Right. And so it's different for everybody and different based on where they're at in life. So
I hear you also saying play with it.
Absolutely. What works for you?
Play. And I love it because we talked to Pat Dwyer a couple of weeks ago, and he reminded us that play is important in knowing ourselves and in life.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to our guest today, Laura Donnelly, and also to John Taylor with Milwaukee Video at mkevideo.com. And a special thanks to Lori.
And to Jen.
Oh, thank you.
And join us next time for Brilliant Business Insights, getting you where you want to go, feeling the way you want to feel, and being who you want to be by removing the BS. Thank you for joining us. Bye.